getting mic'd up there, because the thing about having a company called The Audience is when you do one of these, you turn up, you're like, hi, I'm Mark from The Audience, I'm really late, really sorry. And they go, yeah, sure. And just show you to the auditorium, and you're like, no, I'm supposed to be on stage right now. I really need to get out there. So hopefully you can hear me and the presentation's ready and stuff. So do you have a clicker? Yeah, okay. So basically the company The Audience was founded in 2011. I was at university not far from here studying law and getting a little bit bored of the same student events again and again, kind of like drink your own urine at the union with the sports teams kind of nights. And I think, yeah, you laugh with recognition now, no. So basically, at a certain point, I went to a club called Fabric, which some of you might know in London, and said, like, I'd really, exactly, speak to you after, and said, I'd really like to run a student night, but it's kind of musically credible student night. And they said, oh, interesting. Well, we're going to hold you to that. So, if you say musically credible, you can't just have, you and your friend Dave, DJing in room one. You're going to have to book some proper talent. So, I kind of, lied through my teeth and said, yeah, no problem. Like we can do that, no problem at all. And then, they were like, sure. So here's the date. You can do it. Make sure you book, some big artists, and you'll be fine. I started calling up all the big talent agencies, speaking to them. Hi, I'd like to book Fatboy Slim, Kings of Leon, small people like that. And they're like, yeah, sure. It's $200,000 for that. And I was very surprised and realized that was never going to get anywhere. So I had to figure out something I could offer these artists to play for free. And fortunately, students at that time were blessed with Facebook. And I kind of thought, well, perhaps I can, go to Fatboy Slim and say, look, I don't have any money, but I do have access to this thing called Facebook, and you can't get on it because it's a student-only platform. And maybe we build you a student fan base within this platform, and then you play the show for cheap or free. Stupidly, they kind of started to agree to it. Quickly, lots of managers started to come to us and throw their artists towards us. And then by 2011, kind of going from 2006 to 2011, we had about 300, 400 big A-list celebrities. People from Dynamo the Magician to Emma Watson to the original DJs like Deadmau5 and stuff that we had at the beginning. So anyway, the way that this kind of came to be was that in 2011, I went for a meeting at a place called William Morris Endeavour, which is a big talent agency. And I was very surprised to see Ari Emanuel, who was the CEO of that business, actually played quite accurately by Jeremy Piven in Entourage, if you've ever seen Entourage. And another chap that I knew kind of just from infamy was Sean Parker. And Sean Parker had obviously started Napster, and then he'd been the first president of Facebook, and he was now looking to do a new venture with Ari Emanuel. And I think for some reason they'd taken a bit of interest in my company, and they were basically asking, how many William Morris clients do you represent? What do you do for them? How does it work? And so we basically explained, we represent them on social media. And they said, could you do this for the whole William Morris network of 6,000 celebrities? And of course I thought, no, absolutely no way. But I said, yeah, no problem at all. And they bought my company. So basically, this came out of a conversation that myself and Sean had the first time we ever met. And I kind of just thought it was about time that we kind of put it into something. So this is the first time I'm having a go at this, but let's see. So The Audience now is the William Morris Network, which is essentially the biggest talent network in the world. I wouldn't say everyone's talented, but they're very famous at least. And under NDA in here, aren't we? What we do is there's 6,000 people in this network, but we can't manage 6,000 at once. So we do 700 celebrities at once. And it could be, Pharrell Williams, Usher, Hugh Jackman, or it could be, a new band that we think are going to be really big, or, a big sports personality or something. We publish 6,500 unique items of content across their channels every month. So we're putting out an insane amount of content. And the way we think about it is magazines. We basically say to Mark Wahlberg, look, you haven't got time to do this. There's a bit of a skill around it, although not much really. And we're going to essentially publish a magazine on your behalf across all the different social channels. And if a new social channel pops up, brilliant, we'll publish on there too. So we're now, interestingly, starting to reach over 1 billion consumers a month with our content. I pretty much guarantee that if you guys use social, you're going to be seeing our content at least every 48 hours because a lot of the biggest distribution points in that social graph, which of course are celebrities and well-loved figures, are being managed by us, actually, unfortunately. So that's around 12 billion individual impressions a month. So it's getting quite interesting. See some of our clients, from Pele to Adam Sandler to, I'll tell you the story of Unilever in a bit, Pitbull, and it could be anyone really, Coachella Festival. So we publish thousands of magazines across new media, essentially. And what we do is we do 700 at a time, then we swap them out and do another. And that keeps going. The way we think about it is essentially we are publishers on behalf of these people. So we started thinking about the social platforms and how there's a thing about technology that my mum always says, it's like you can't even keep up with how quickly it's moving. There's a book called The Second Machine Age which talks quite a lot about this, and it's about the kind of cognitive dissonance that you start to get when you start realizing that every time you've learned something, you need to learn some more. Great if you're running conferences and seminars, actually. We were talking about how there's constantly new platforms developing. So, imagine this is Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and God knows what else is about to come along. We started realizing that perhaps it was more interesting to kind of have ownership of popular culture within all the platforms than it was to have ownership of one individual platform. And this was the conversation that Sean and I had under the influence of a lot of alcohol at a certain point. So we started talking about the analogy of, how do we demystify it and make it less scary to talk about these social platforms and their proliferation and their constant growing and reproducing and more. So we started thinking, we've got to bring it back to something that makes a lot of sense in a human and biological way. So we started talking about this analogy of the social organism, about how social media is essentially a living organism, like a bush or a tree or something more biological than that. And essentially it's going to keep growing. We've got to expect it to keep growing. Life spreads. So there's nothing scary about, there's a new platform that's getting really big. And even I, to be honest with you, people will be like, are you using WeChat? And I'm like, no, I've never even heard of it, to be honest with you. So it's quite, and I understand where people are coming from when they say that it's all a bit much. So I wanted to kind of demystify it a little bit by kind of getting into what we believe. So Sean and I made this the first night that we ever kind of sat together. He drew it on a thing, and then we went away and kind of created it a bit better. Unbelievably, this is, if you look at the analogy between that and that, very similar. But this is Facebook. So these points here are the biggest, most resonant distribution points on the network. And if you think about network theory in this kind of biological analogy, things start to become a little bit more clear. And at least you get less heart palpitations anyway. So we started realizing that actually, almost by happenstance, we were actually managing some of the biggest distribution points in these networks. So, this is President Obama, who's one of our clients. This will be, Charlize Theron, who receives an insane amount of interaction on every post, and her content spreads through the system very, very conductively, let's say. Whether it was, God bless brands, but, this tiny minuscule dot here would be like the Ford page. Do you know what I mean? And I think, first of all, this is a good analogy because it shows brands what they're up against. And brands have understood that there's content. They understood that for a long time. And now they've understood that there's platforms. And so they're kind of looking at it and they're going, we put the content in the platforms, but it's not working. And then, because they don't realize that they're trying to put square objects, TV-shaped objects down holes that could be round, could be triangular, could be anything, but they have particular executional parameters about them that they're not quite getting. And so they're trying to, like Sean always says, social networks are developed. They're not developing, they're developed. It's marketeers that haven't developed to actually make use of the social networks yet. So marketeers are making big mistakes every day, like massive faux pas, and that's why it's not really working. The second thing to accept is that you are tiny, if you're a brand, you just got to accept it. Look at your people talking about metric. You're a tiny, tiny little fish in this massive ecosystem. And actually the most resonant properties are, to an individual, as Ed was saying, your friends, your family, but, people on the global scale are, the global celebrities and people that we're lucky enough to manage. So all organisms are defined by 7 distinct characteristics, I found out when we started digging into this. And so I started to very tenuously kind of merge these two things together. The first one, and I think this is just the most important one, is that all life rids itself of pollution. And in exactly the same way, the social organism, which includes all the platforms, every single individual platform, every single piece of nourishing or not nourishing content that is flowing or not flowing through those platforms, social organisms react poorly to negativity and bad marketing. Basically, they excrete bad marketing. That's the bottom line. And I like that analogy because it kind of gets to some of the unbelievable faux pas that we're talking about brands doing. Burger King here have asked the question to their consumers, can you find the hidden chicken nugget? Like when you find it. Unfathomably bad stuff, okay? My friend John runs a brilliant page, which I really hope you'll all sign up to, called Condescending Corporate Brand Page. And it's just full of unbelievable examples, like this one. Skoda. And by the way, I pulled all of these this morning. Like, these are not like old examples, they're fresh. To you, which side of a Skoda is more important, front or back? It's unbelievable. So, you know, the quote from the biological textbook is, waste products, pollutants, and foreign bodies are expelled as quickly as possible. And that is true of the newsfeed as well. The newsfeed in any system allows content that's conductive to travel, and it wipes off the face of the planet content that isn't conductive immediately. It's kind of like the tide coming in. You know, brands will sit there and they'll say, oh, we built this beautiful sandcastle, and they kind of click post, and they stand back, and like they just get like, you know, one like from an employee or something like that, and then the newsfeed kind of comes in, the tide changes, and the fucking thing is destroyed. And that's the way it should be. And Sean always says that the algorithm at the center of the newsfeed is technically there to curate your experience and make it, but actually it's a self-defense algorithm for the platform so that the ghost of MySpace doesn't haunt the halls of Facebook. So anyway, just a few more examples here. Whiskers UK. My cat loves coffins, perhaps? I don't know. Like, what is this? I don't understand this. And this one I love, because it just gets to the truth about people talking about target consumers and behavioral economics. And it's absolutely important. But you know what? We're human beings here for a potentially finite amount of time, hopefully. And you know, we've got, I believe, a human soul. And I think that this is deeply undernourishing for that, okay? So, look, Campari, if you could sum up the last 150 years of Campari in 3 words, what would they be? And this is just genius. Crap social media. So I really love this, because it really gets to the core of the fact that, like, if you're publishing into a brand page and you have any control, or you know anyone that is working on a brand page for a brand, you really have to understand that what you're pumping out it could be nourishing content that is genuinely, conductive across these social platforms and these social organisms, or it could be just a pollutant that needs to be expelled from the system immediately. And so please try and think about that when you're creating content. So the next thing is life must be nourished. The flip side of this, social organisms voraciously consume content. We know that millennials are now consuming a phenomenal amount of content a day. I don't know what millennials even are, really, but they're just human beings like us all. But millennials consume over 5 hours of content per day. Most of it is user-generated. So it's, a mate sending them a photo of whatever funny thing is happening. It's obviously a cat of some kind, usually. And the point is that professional branded content is competing with every other relationship you have in this social graph and this organism. And it's losing out unbelievably badly. So we work with some brands now, and they say, we've got Ridley Scott to direct this World Cup video for us. It costs $7 million for that, and we've got £21 million worth of media, and we're ready to go. And I say, okay, it's interesting. I mean, the problem you've got is that, like, my dad just put a photo of him up at a rave. And the other thing is that I just went out last night, and there's some really good photos that I've just been tagged in. I want to check them out. And my mate was DJing the other day. I got to go backstage with him, and he was playing at Glastonbury. So I'm a bit not that bothered about your £7 million Ridley Scott video, to be totally honest with you. And so this is what brands still don't understand. That the mountain that they're climbing is, it's almost insurmountably high, because I don't mind seeing a post from the Shawshank Redemption page, because it's my favourite film, or a post from Sigur Rós, because they're one of my favourite bands. But I see a sponsored post from a betting, Ladbrokes or something. All they're essentially doing is paying money to get an impression for me to hate them more, to be totally honest. And especially on YouTube. YouTube's the worst, because unskippable ads on YouTube, that's it. If I get an unskippable ad on YouTube, I'm never working with that. I will never work with that brand again. Because in terms of the brand bank account, they have withdrawn from me. I say to brands all the time, the only withdrawal in the brand bank account that you should be making is the price point. Everything else, every time you annoy me, you fuck me off, that's a withdrawal, right? And and at a certain point, I'm going to become too consumer savvy to deal with you anymore. That's why there's no loyalty. Like, people thought that, people were loyal to the record labels. They realized they never cared about the record labels, they cared about the artists. And if the artists, the Kaiser Chiefs, a terrible example, but we used to manage them for years. And they went away because they were not in album cycle anymore. So their manager was like, look, we're not in album cycle anymore. We're going to come back and speak to you guys about managing their stuff when they're in album cycle. So does it occur to you that like just before Glastonbury, you get a lot of phone calls from people that you don't really know that well asking if you can sort out a guest list? And he was like, yeah. And I said, well, you're basically doing that with your fans. You're basically saying, I haven't got anything to sell you, and I don't want anything from you, so I'm not going to communicate with you for a little while. And so, obviously, they went away. They took a little bit longer than they expected to make the album, and they posted a new thing like, guys, really exciting, we've got a new album out. They lost 160,000 fans in 3 days because people were like, it came up in the newspaper, people were like, oh, do I still like the Kaiser Chiefs? Unlike, that's how brutal it is. So, anyway, life reacts to physical stimulus. Social organisms react to stimulus through emotions. And I think this is a really important one, and I wouldn't be in social media if I didn't believe this. This was Game of Thrones, when a big event happened called the Red Wedding. I'm sure some of you will know. Some of the, I've just about picked my floor off the ground from watching Game of Thrones. So my friend Ryan saying, F you, Game of Thrones, you are making me cry. And so, this was a moment in social that everybody, particularly in my geeky newsfeed, was talking about this emotion. And emotions travel incredibly well through these platforms. Social life exchanges with its environment. So this emotion isn't just a broadcast thing, it's an exchange. And social organisms are the exchange of these emotions. I really believe that. I think this demystifies everything about social personally for me. And we've been lucky enough to have a lot of the most successful campaigns in social and work with a lot of the biggest people in those platforms. And honestly, it's emotions. It's all about emotions. And when we're sitting in the room and people are talking about this and that metric, and I'm one of the first, luckily to be able to say, look, with respect, nobody cares that your Oral-B toothbrush has got 3 more bristles than the Colgate one. They don't care unless you can tell them a story that in some way kind of like fits with them, like emotionally, then it just don't bother. This was obviously something that happened yesterday. I just thought it was so pertinent because I think so many people followed Stephen. He obviously passed away yesterday. And, this is his mum's update saying that, she's so proud that so many people, over 1 million people liked the page. Yesterday, there was 672,000 people. So more than half that page was actively sharing that content, talking about it, mentioning him. It's phenomenal. And with respect, a brand is releasing their campaign at the same time, and just nobody cares. This has had 195,000 shares at the time that I screenshot this morning. It's only been up there for a couple of hours. It's been up there for 12 hours. That's emotions working through the platform. And this is a lady who, I just screenshot some of these things, but she said, I never met Stephen, but I just wanted to say what a great inspiration he was, and he touched a lot of people, and will always be remembered. Take care, so sorry for your loss. So that's what I mean about that exchange. And the thing about broadcast thinking, like I said at the beginning, that brands do understand, is they don't give enough space for the second half of that part. They're not thinking, how do our consumers do something with this? They're just thinking, how do we hit them over the head with it? So, nearly done. All life has the ability to flow and move internally. Social organisms are architected to flow frictionlessly by sharing. So we never worked with brands until Dove came to us, and I was very against the idea. And they said that they had this campaign called Real Beauty Sketches, which hopefully some of you have seen. Sketch artist draws a lady as she describes himself, and then also a sketch artist draws a lady as somebody, a complete stranger describes her. It's really, really good video, actually. And I'll be honest with you, the first time I saw it, I was a bit hungover, and I was quite moved by it. I actually thought, this is a good piece of content. It actually goes to the spiritual core of human beings and the intrapersonal dilemmas we have about how we think of ourselves, and it says something that we haven't said enough in popular culture, and it's important. It should be out there. So we decided, okay, we're going to work with a brand for the first time. And the way that we did that was we built hundreds of individual social objects that went out across the social graphs of all the different social platforms. And that video is actually, it's actually outdated that, but the video's been viewed over 200 million times now, and it's the most successful piece of branded content in the history of the world. It's won 19 Cannes Lions, and it's phenomenal. It completely changed Unilever's way of thinking about everything, and they're really, working with us on a lot of stuff now. The other thing about letting people be involved in what you're saying is that life evolves through reproduction. So social organisms evolve through meme replication. You should have fun with it. Let people play with your content. When we were working with Barack Obama, Clint Eastwood said something about there's an empty chair, and he was talking about the lame duck president as he saw it. Within 12 minutes, we managed to get sign-off of this post saying, this seat's taken, with the back of the president's head saying President of the United States. And I kind of mentioned this to Keith Weed at Unilever when he was saying, it's difficult though, we have legal departments and we have, there's a lot of red tape to get a post out, in real time. I said, with respect, like the President of the United States managed to get a post out in 12 minutes. So figure that one out. It's about how much you want it, It's like I speak to Google, and guess what Google used to build their company? Gmail, Google Drive, Chrome, same stuff we all have. They just have a different willfulness and a different mindset, different intent towards approaching those same tools. The other thing with Real Beauty Sketches, we were making, anyone that really shared the content was really a fan of it and was sharing it out in the social system, we were actually drawing a photo of them, sketching it, and then sending it to them via the Dove Twitter account, which was actually really successful. Anyway, what happened next was that the content was successful, so we actually started to see parody videos of that content. I urge you to watch these things. These are hilarious. In this one, women were talking about how they're more beautiful than they think they are, but the men were much less beautiful than they thought they were. So this guy drew himself as George Clooney and then found that this was his girlfriend's interpretation of him. So, and actually those videos, received tens of millions of views as well and drove back to the original. Final thing, living things become larger and more complicated as they grow. Coming back to my first point, don't be overwhelmed by this. It's all the same thing. If we understand that it's the exchange of emotions, that all those principles I've talked about, but ultimately that success in social is about emotion. It doesn't become so scary. So a new platform pops up, whatever. It's the same thing. It's just a new pipe to put good content down. But we need to think about the type of content we're using. I won't even bother with that. And just finally, this is, talking about complication, but it's really not that complicated. This is kind of a mechanized version of that idea. This post here was actually the most successful post of all time. It was 4 more years on behalf of Barack Obama. And basically what we did was, we essentially thought about this as every individual platform, we don't get confused, and it's not a good idea to get confused about which individual platform you're starting with. Just start by thinking about the story, the community, what the content themes are, and then think about the platform. And then do your post, use your paid media, burn it off, get some insights, and learn. It's really that simple. Like, people start with platforms first. I think they should start with content first. And that was that post, the biggest tweet and Facebook post of all time, which was amazing. Actually, it might not be anymore because of Ellen DeGeneres. But anyway, yeah. Thank you very much. Cheers. If you've got any questions.
Thank you, Mark. You must have the most enviable client list. That's from the Kaiser Chiefs to Barack Obama. That's going on. We've got time. We're running a little bit late already, which bodes well. We've got time for one question, if anybody's got.
Hi, Paul Armstrong, I'm writing for Reuters today. Quick question on the mimetic sort of theory and that sort of thing that we talked about there. When you've got networks like Facebook who are sort of quite controlling those pipes for a lot of brands in a number of ways, how do you sort of see that moving forward with the top 50, so the last 50 interactions really garner what you see the next time you go on Facebook? How's that going to change? That's
a really good question. The essence of algorithms is, and I think Ed spoke about it earlier on, is that they're there to do 2 jobs. One is to curate the magazine, essentially, that you're looking at in your news feed and make sure that it's more relevant to you so that you don't get, because spam is in the eye of the beholder, right? And the second one is to defend the platform itself as an organism, and that's what we were trying to get to about this thing. I think what we're going to see now is if you look at the way that they've introduced ads to Pinterest just recently, or they've reintroduced ads to Instagram, is actually the platforms are actually saying, no, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't put 10 million quid behind this post of your product. You just can't do it. Like, we're going to curate which brands are allowed to advertise here and what the content is. And obviously that will have to open up. But the whole idea is to build good case studies to try and teach, like I said, marketeers to, like I said, the platforms are developed. They are fully developed. They're much more developed than we are. It's us that need to develop to think about how these platforms actually work. We need to start working within them. It's us that's not working. So so the algorithms are going to be there to punish bad decisions and reward good content decisions. And so when people say that a Facebook page and a brand page can only receive 16, then it was 6, and it's less than that now percentage of the reach of the page. So if this auditorium was 100 people, it might be like those guys down the corner there, they see the update, but everyone else doesn't. That's absolute nonsense. Like, if you play the algorithm every day and show that every post you've ever made is successful, you grow and grow and grow. We have pages that have over 12 million, 12,000% of the page seeing the content. So that's like, this room is the page, and everybody in this square mile sees the content because so many people share it. So, the same way with that Stephen story, where you got 195,000 shares. The viral coefficient of that is huge. So if we individually can think a little bit more systematically about this social organism, I think we will be able to be ready for whatever the next changes are going to be.
Mark, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.